The air is thick with the smell of damp earth, mingled with the sweet scent of tropical flowers as you tread across a landscape where towering mountains meet dense jungles and winding rivers. The birds of paradise dart in flashes of color above your head, their songs weaving into the hum of unseen insects. You are in a place where the land itself feels alive, where every valley, ridge and island holds a story. Papua New Guinea is not a single world, but hundreds, even thousands of worlds stitched together across rugged terrain and scattered islands. Each group of people you encounter speaks a different tongue, and you marvel at how there are more than 800 languages here, more than any other country on Earth. These languages are not mere dialects, they are vessels of identity carrying myths, customs and ways of life that have been preserved for centuries. You pass through villages perched on stilts above swamplands, where elders sit around fires carving wood and telling tales of ancestral spirits. Farther inland clans reside in highland valleys, cultivating sweet potatoes and tending to pigs that are not just food but social currency in intricate systems of exchange. Ceremonies brimming with vibrant body paint, feathered headdresses and rhythmic chants mark every important event, from births to warfare to peacemaking. The land is both harsh and generous, demanding resilience and rewarding those who know how to live with it. Here, isolation has created a kaleidoscope of societies, each proud of its distinct traditions, yet each wary of outsiders who do not understand their ways. For generations, life has revolved around clan loyalty. You see alliances formed and broken, disputes fought with spears, and peace brokered with elaborate rituals. Power flows not through kings or parliaments, but through elders and big men who earn respect by generosity, wisdom, and sometimes cunning. Trade routes, long before European contact, connected coastal fishers with inland gardeners, and even shells and obsidian traveled across vast distances, exchanged in rituals that strengthened ties between groups. This land, though fragmented in culture, has always been interconnected in its own rhythm. Historians still argue whether the earliest migrations that shaped these societies came in one wave or several, but they agree the first settlers arrived tens of thousands of years ago, making this one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited regions. You look toward the ocean and you can almost sense the centuries of isolation slowly thinning. In the 16th century, distant sails appeared on the horizon. Yet in this first chapter of Contact, they are ghosts. You rarely see the faces of those who came. Spanish and Portuguese ships skirted the coasts, naming the land Nueva Guinea because the dark-skinned inhabitants reminded them of Africa's Guinea coast. The name stuck even as the people here remained untouched by foreign control. The strangers left little more than fleeting impressions, perhaps a few iron tools traded, perhaps a memory passed down in a story of a floating giant with wings. The world beyond these shores was changing fast, yet here time seemed to move on in its own steady way. Even as the centuries rolled on, no empire planted a serious foothold here. Disease, rough terrain, and the sheer difficulty of navigating dense forests and steep mountains kept the outside world at bay. You almost chuckle nature itself played gatekeeper, daring anyone to truly dominate this land. But whispers of change blew in with every breeze that carried news of far-off powers carving up the globe. The land may not yet be under colonial rule, but the shadow of it is stretching closer. It is a quiet before the storm, a moment where traditions remain strong and unbroken, yet just beyond the horizon, forces gather that will try to reshape everything. As the sun dips low, casting golden light over the highlands, you feel the weight of 1,000 cultures breathing in unison, unaware that the next chapters will bring both pain and resilience. Before we begin, if this little corner of calm has brought you any comfort, feel free to like the video and subscribe only if it feels genuine to you. No pressure. I'd also love to hear from you. Just drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always special to know we're all quietly gathered here from different corners of the world, like a family, scattered but still connected. All right, let's ease into the story together. The sun rises over the coral sea and the air carries a salty tang as you stand on a stretch of beach where the waves whisper secrets of distant lands. It is the early 1500s and the world beyond this horizon is being violently remade by European explorers, hungry for gold, spices and glory. You watch as a fleet of unfamiliar sails punctures the morning mist. The ships look like floating fortresses, their wooden hulls creaking, their sails filled with the same winds that have carried them across oceans. These are not traders of old Polynesian voyages. They are Spanish and Portuguese adventurers chasing the edges of their maps. They come not with a need to understand, but to name, to claim, and to move on. When Spanish navigator Íñigo Ortiz de Retes sails along the northern coast in 1545, he christens the land Nueva Guinea, inspired by the dark skin of the locals, which reminds him of Africans from Guinea. The irony drips like morning dew, an entire land full of its own names and stories, reduced in European memory to a comparison. Yet this name will echo through history, enduring long after the sails vanish. Despite the dramatic appearance, these early explorers are like shadows passing over water. They record coastlines, sketch crude maps, and occasionally trade trinkets, but they do not linger. The land remains its own, the mountains impassable, and the dense jungles unforgiving to foreign intrusion. You walk inland and find the people continuing their lives almost untouched. The explorers bring tales of strange goods, iron tools that cut cleaner than stone beads of glass, that glimmer like captured stars, but they also bring rumors of disease and violence from lands they have conquered elsewhere. Some encounters end with tense standoffs as villagers stare down these newcomers with spears ready. Others are more peaceful, marked by cautious exchange. Historians still argue whether these first contacts were mostly hostile or curious, for the evidence is thin, buried under layers of oral tradition and scattered European logs. But one thing is certain, the outsiders come and go, leaving the cultures here largely undisturbed for now. Over the next 2 centuries, more ships pass by, Dutch, English, even occasional French navigators, all mapping, naming and claiming little pieces on paper maps, while barely stepping foot on the land they label. It is almost laughable the way they draw borders across places they have never seen. Meanwhile, the people here keep building their gardens, hunting in the forests, trading shells along the coasts and honoring ancestors in their rituals. The isolation that has protected them for millennia continues to hold strong. You sense, however, that this buffer will not last forever. By the 19th century, the European gaze sharpens. Missionaries begin to arrive, their white robes stark against the greenery. They come not with swords, but with Bibles and the belief that their faith should replace the spirits of the land. They build small churches on the coasts, learning local tongues and translating their scriptures. Some villagers embrace the new teachings, intrigued by promises of eternal life or the gifts of literacy and medicine. Others resist, clinging tightly to the ancestors and the old gods. You watch as 2 worlds overlap, not yet clashing, but circling each other warily. The explorers' sails may have been fleeting, but their legacy lingers like footprints in wet sand. A trickle of missionaries, traders and adventurers grows stronger, each leaving their mark. Foreigners begin to see Papua New Guinea not as an impassable wilderness, but as a place to be shaped to their purposes. For now the hills still echo with the old songs and the jungles remain unconquered. But as you glance back at the horizon, another wave of change is already gathering strength. The morning mist clings to the coastline as you wander along a narrow footpath where footprints of barefoot traders lead toward a small gathering of huts by the sea. It is the mid-1800s and the pace of change quickens. Sailboats from Europe now appear more frequently, not as fleeting silhouettes but as familiar visitors. They drop anchor and unload goods, cloth, tools, tobacco and other items that gleam with novelty in the tropical sun. You watch as local villagers trade yams, shells and even copra for these foreign wares. The exchanges seem harmless at first, almost exciting, yet with every trade, foreign influence burrows a little deeper into the rhythms of life. Missionaries arrive in greater numbers, their presence no longer a rare curiosity. They build schools and churches, teaching local children to read and write but also urging them to abandon the ways of their ancestors. You hear hymns sung in villages where not long ago only the chants of traditional ceremonies echoed. For many, the new teachings bring healing and opportunities, knowledge of Western medicine, the chance to communicate in writing a link to the wider world. For others, it feels like an erosion as sacred beliefs and customs are dismissed as superstition. You sense a quiet tension change is coming, but it is uneven, and not everyone agrees on whether it is a blessing or a burden. With missionaries come traders, men with weathered faces and calculating eyes. They seek more than goodwill, they seek profit. Sandalwood pearls and other resources flow out, replaced by weapons, alcohol, and goods that subtly shift power balances between clans. The arrival of firearms changes the nature of conflict, making disputes deadlier and unsettling the old equilibrium. Rumors spread of certain villages using guns to dominate their neighbors, while others grow wary of the outsiders who supply them. Historians still debate whether these early trades helped strengthen some communities or weakened them by sowing division. Adventurers and explorers also roam the interior, sketching landscapes, collecting specimens, and writing reports to send back to Europe. To them, the highlands remain a mystery, a blank spot on their maps that stirs their imaginations. They marvel at the towering peaks, at the unfamiliar plants and animals, and at the fierce independence of the people. Yet they also describe the land as wild, untamed, even in need of guidance, words that justify the colonial ambitions quietly brewing in distant capitals. Amid this creeping tide of outsiders, some alliances form. Chiefs find value in the foreign goods and technology, sometimes welcoming missionaries for the education they bring. Others keep their distance, driving missionaries away or limiting contact. You stand in a village where elders debate whether to accept these foreigners fully or to hold them at arm's length. The choice is not simple. Accepting outsiders may bring new opportunities, but it risks losing control of traditions and authority. Resisting them may preserve identity, but risks isolation from new sources of power. By the late 19th century, the trickle of influence becomes a flow. The coasts begin to see small European settlements where traders establish posts and missionaries expand their reach. A quirky tidbit lingers in your mind. In some areas, missionaries resort to distributing clothing to encourage modesty among villagers, unused to European dress codes, leading to colorful clashes of fashion where traditional adornments meet stiff Western fabrics. It's almost humorous. Two worlds stitched awkwardly together, neither fully understanding the other. The jungles still roar with life, the mountains still stand untouched, but the edges of this land are fraying under the touch of foreign hands. You can feel it. A new game is being played, one of subtle control, one that will soon move from persuasion to outright domination. The stage is set for a bolder move as colonial powers sharpen their lines on maps and prepare to turn influence into rule. The sky feels heavier as you watch ships glide into harbors with flags fluttering proudly in the wind, symbols of powers far from these shores. It is the late 19th century, and the world has entered an age where European empires greedily divide lands as though carving a pie at a table where only they have seats. You stand on the coastline, the sea breeze mingling with the tension in the air as diplomats in faraway capitals debate who will control these islands, while the people who live here have no voice in the matter. The so-called scramble for Africa echoes here in the Pacific, where territory becomes a trophy to claim rather than a home to respect. Germany stakes its claim, first seizing the northeastern part of the island and declaring it German New Guinea in 1884. Its flag rises over trading posts, and German administrators set to work organizing plantations for copra and other exports. They bring roads, some schools, and a rigid sense of order, yet they also impose harsh labor systems, treating local people as workers for their profit rather than partners in development. You watch villagers coerced into carrying loads, building infrastructure, and working under the sun on plantations they do not own. Resistance brews quietly, sometimes erupting in defiance, other times swallowed down because the consequences are too severe. Meanwhile, the southeastern part falls under British protection in the same year, becoming British New Guinea. The Union Jack flaps against the tropical sky, and British officials establish administrative centres, mission schools, and a legal system that seems distant from the customs of the people. Initially, British presence feels less aggressive than the Germans' plantation drive, yet it still represents foreign control over ancestral land. Here, too, local traditions face pressure as foreign laws and norms seep into daily life. Historians still argue whether British policies were more benevolent or simply more subtly exploitative. But to the people living under them, control is control no matter how it's dressed. In 1906, Britain hands over the administration of its territory to Australia, turning British New Guinea into the territory of Papua. You observe the transition, noting how the change in flag does not change the underlying reality: the land is still governed by outsiders. Australian administrators continue many of the same policies, focusing on resource extraction and gradual civilization of the indigenous population, often through strict paternalistic rules. Traditional leaders find themselves sidelined, their authority undercut by colonial courts and regulations. The irony is sharp: those who have managed their societies for millennia are now treated as if they need guidance to govern themselves. In German New Guinea, life is shaped by a different rhythm, more commercial, more driven by profit. German firms dominate trade, building a network of plantations that rely heavily on labor, recruited sometimes forcibly from local communities and neighboring islands. Villagers whisper stories of men taken far from home to work in harsh conditions. Yet the Germans also leave a mark through infrastructure and a surprisingly organized administration that fascinates some historians even today. A quirky tidbit stands out: the Germans introduce certain European plants and animals, like rubber trees and goats, that thrive unexpectedly, sometimes disrupting the local ecology in ways that still linger. By the early 20th century, the colonial chessboard is set. The island is split between German New Guinea in the north and the Australian-controlled territory of Papua in the south. The people, however, remain resilient. They continue their ceremonies, maintain their gardens, and quietly adapt when they must. You see the blend of old and new villagers wearing European shirts over traditional grass skirts, speaking their languages while learning English or German in mission schools. It's a strange coexistence, neither fully accepting nor fully rejecting the foreign presence. Despite the surface calm cracks formed beneath, you sense a growing awareness that the foreign power's interests are not the same as those of the people who have always called this land home. Even as colonial administrators draw their lines on maps, the heartbeat of Papua New Guinea remains its own, quietly waiting for the moment it can rise and assert itself. The storm clouds of a greater global conflict are gathering on the horizon, and they will soon shake these colonial structures to their core. The air smells of smoke and metal, as distant thunder grows louder, not the thunder of storms, but the roar of engines and the crash of bombs. It is the early 1940s, and World War II has erupted, spilling across the Pacific like a relentless tide. You stand on a ridge overlooking the jungle when you first hear it, the hum of aircraft slicing through the sky, their shadows streaking across the canopy. Papua New Guinea, once a quiet colonial outpost, suddenly becomes a critical battlefield where the ambitions of empires collide. Japanese forces sweep across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, advancing rapidly toward the islands. They seize parts of New Guinea, including areas previously under German influence and now administered by Australia. The invasion feels like a storm breaking over the land. Villagers flee into the forests, hiding from both advancing troops and the chaos of war. Japanese soldiers establish camps, cut supply routes, and use forced labor, creating fear among the local population. You see houses burned, gardens trampled, and the fragile order of colonial life shattered overnight. Yet amid this terror, an unexpected story unfolds: the resilience and bravery of Papuans. Australian troops alongside American forces mount fierce resistance. The Kokoda Track campaign becomes legendary, a brutal series of battles fought along a narrow, treacherous mountain trail where the jungle itself seems to conspire against both sides. You trek with soldiers stumbling through mud leeches clinging to their skin, the air thick with humidity and tension. Supplies run low and morale falters, and then the fuzzy-wuzzy angels appear. That's what Australian soldiers call the Papuan carriers, who guide, feed, and rescue the wounded, often at great risk to themselves. These men move silently through the jungle, carrying soldiers on makeshift stretchers, their compassion shining through the darkness of war. Historians still argue whether the Kokoda Track was the turning point of the Pacific War or simply one of many battles in the larger struggle. What is undeniable is that Papuans played a crucial role, not just as passive onlookers, but as active participants whose contributions saved countless lives. Their actions become an enduring symbol of courage and humanity amid destruction. The war leaves its scars. Villages are destroyed, populations displaced, and many communities bear the trauma of forced labor and violence. Yet the experience also plants seeds of change. For the first time, many Papuans see colonial powers who once seemed invincible struggle and bleed. They witness Japanese and Western soldiers alike vulnerable in the jungle, and they realize that foreign rule is not unshakable. You hear whispered conversations in the aftermath of battles. If these great empires can fight each other to exhaustion, who truly has the right to rule over this land? When the war ends in 1945, the Japanese retreat, leaving devastation behind. The Australians return, but they do so to a land forever altered by the conflict. The people of Papua New Guinea have seen a glimpse of their own strength, and that vision cannot be easily erased. Reconstruction begins, and with it a slow but growing sense of national identity. You watch as mission schools expand, roads are rebuilt, and new opportunities emerge. Yet beneath the surface a quiet restlessness simmers. There is a quirky post-war image that lingers in your mind: Australian soldiers leaving behind not only military equipment but also cultural artifacts like old radios and bicycles. Papuan villagers repurpose these objects in creative ways, turning scraps into tools, making something new out of remnants of war. It's a metaphor, really taking the broken pieces left by outsiders and reshaping them into something useful, something their own. The war has redrawn the global order, and with it, the colonial grip begins to weaken. The jungles that once echoed with gunfire now hum with life again, but the memory of the struggle lingers like a warning. You sense that this land, scarred yet unbroken, is preparing itself for the next great challenge, moving from a colony to a nation, from survival to self-determination. The jungle has healed much of its wartime wounds, yet the smell of burnt metal and rust still lingers where old tanks lie half-buried under vines. It is the late 1940s into the 1950s, and Papua New Guinea now finds itself fully under Australian trusteeship, as mandated by the United Nations. You walk along dusty roads where Australian patrols pass by, their uniforms less tense than during the war, but still a reminder of control. The country is administratively merged, the former German New Guinea captured during World War I, and the territory of Papua now form a single unit under Australian governance. On paper, this seems like progress, but to many Papuans it feels like one master replacing another. The Australians adopt a paternalistic approach. They establish councils, schools, hospitals and missions, but always with the assumption that they must guide and teach the natives toward civilization. You hear phrases muttered in offices not ready for self-rule. They need more time, as though the ability to govern themselves is a prize dangled just out of reach. Yet life is slowly modernizing. In towns like Port Moresby, you see a mix of traditional thatched houses standing next to government buildings of concrete, their sharp edges cutting against the tropical skyline. Trucks rattle down roads built during the war, while villagers still walk barefoot along the same paths their ancestors used. Australian policies encourage some education, and mission schools produce the first generation of literate Papuans who begin to think critically about their future. Some move into administrative roles, bridging the gap between the colonial system and their communities. Others become outspoken critics of the slow pace of reform. You watch young leaders emerge, charismatic figures who understand both the traditions of their people and the politics of the modern world. Their voices, once whispers, begin to grow louder. The economy, however, remains tightly controlled by Australia. Plantations produce copra and cocoa for export, but the wealth flows outward, not into local hands. Mining ventures explore the land's rich minerals, laying the groundwork for future conflicts over resources. For now, most villagers remain subsistence farmers, their lives shaped more by the rhythm of gardens and markets than by the distant machinations of government. You sense the frustration building a quiet awareness that the resources of this land should benefit its people, not just foreign investors. Cultural resilience remains strong. You see ceremonies still vibrant, languages still spoken, and clans still powerful in local affairs. The Australians try to introduce Western legal systems and governance, yet they often find themselves negotiating with customary leaders who command real loyalty. Historians still argue whether this period was one of cultural erosion or cultural adaptation, but as you move through the villages, it's clear the old ways have not disappeared. They have adapted, bending without breaking. One quirky image sticks with you: Australian administrators requiring villagers to wear European-style clothing when visiting government offices, leading to amusing sights of men in second-hand suits paired with bare feet, and women mixing floral dresses with traditional shell jewelry. It's an awkward, almost comical blend of worlds, yet it symbolizes how Papuans take what is imposed on them and make it their own. By the early 1960s, the winds of change are blowing. Across Africa, nations are winning independence, and the global mood is shifting toward decolonization. The United Nations begins pressing Australia to prepare Papua New Guinea for self-government, though Canberra drags its feet, claiming the country is not yet ready. You sense the irony in their caution. Ready or not, the desire for autonomy is rising, and no colonial administration can hold back the tide forever. The mountains remain as they always were, silent, watchful, eternal. But beneath them, the people are stirring, gathering ideas, and imagining a future where their land is theirs to govern. The next chapter will see those whispers turn into action as the call for self-rule grows too strong to ignore. The air is different now, charged with an energy you can almost taste as you walk through Port Moresby in the early 1960s. The once quiet administrative town now buzzes with meetings, rallies, and conversations in many languages about a shared dream: self-determination. Across Papua New Guinea, local voices are rising, cutting through the hum of colonial authority like drums before a storm. You pass groups of young men and women gathering under trees, debating politics with a mix of fiery passion and cautious hope. They speak not only in Tok Pisin or Motu, but also in English, the language of the administration now turned into a tool to demand change. The first seeds of political organisation sprout with the formation of local councils, an Australian experiment in limited self-governance. You see villagers electing representatives for the first time, their votes cast on dusty ballots that feel both strange and empowering. Some elders shake their heads, preferring the authority of clan leaders. Others embrace the novelty, seeing in it a path to something greater. These councils may have little power at first, but they are training grounds for future leaders, teaching them the ways of parliamentary debate while grounding them in the needs of their people. Mission schools and universities abroad begin to bear fruit. A new generation of educated Papuans, teachers, lawyers, administrators, returns home armed with ideas about independence. Among them is Michael Samar, a teacher turned journalist who will become the voice of a movement. You watch him addressing small gatherings, his words weaving a vision of unity among a land of many tribes. He speaks with calm determination, convincing listeners that despite their differences, they share a common destiny. His charisma spreads like wildfire, and soon he is at the heart of the Pangu Party, the political force advocating self-government. Meanwhile, Australia feels the growing pressure. Internationally, the winds of decolonization are sweeping across the globe, and the United Nations keeps reminding Canberra of its responsibility to prepare Papua New Guinea for independence. Domestically, however, some Australians cling to the belief that the country is not ready, citing its fragmented cultures and rugged terrain. Historians still argue whether this hesitation was genuine concern or a convenient excuse to maintain control. In villages far from the capital, the independence movement feels distant at first. Daily life still revolves around gardens, fishing, and clan affairs. Yet as radio broadcasts spread news and local leaders discuss reforms, the idea of a national identity begins to take root. You see a remarkable blending traditional sing-sings where dancers in feathered headdresses and painted faces stomp the earth now feature speeches about self-rule. Culture and politics intertwine, strengthening rather than weakening each other. One quirky image stays with you: campaign posters in the late 1960s showing candidates wearing Western suits but adorned with traditional necklaces or headdresses, as if to say, "We are modern, but we are still ours." It's a statement of identity, a refusal to let progress erase tradition. By 1964, the first House of Assembly is formed with elected Papuan members sitting alongside Australian officials. You step into the chamber and feel the tension as voices clash, some cautious, others bold over the future of the country. It's not perfect. Power still lies largely in Australian hands, but the door has been opened. Each debate, each decision is a step toward autonomy. Over the next few years, reforms accelerate. More seats are given to local representatives and policies begin shifting to reflect local priorities rather than Australian interests. You can almost hear the drumbeat of change growing louder, echoing from the highlands to the islands. The people are learning to navigate the machinery of governance, turning colonial structures into instruments of their own liberation. By the late 1960s, independence is no longer a distant dream. It is a possibility shimmering on the horizon. You feel it in the air, in the speeches, in the determined eyes of young leaders. The colonial grip is loosening, and the people of Papua New Guinea are preparing to take control of their destiny. The call for freedom, once a whisper, is now a song sung across mountains and valleys, unstoppable in its momentum. The early 1970s arrive with a quiet tension, like the pause before a decisive leap. You step into a bustling Port Moresby market where voices blend in a lively chorus, vendors calling out prices in Tok Pisin, children laughing, politicians mingling among ordinary people to explain the future they envision. The atmosphere hums with possibility. You sense that the colony has reached a tipping point. The push for self-government is no longer an abstract ideal, but a concrete demand shaping every conversation. Australia, under growing international pressure, begins negotiating the path forward. Officials fly in from Canberra, their briefcases filled with draft policies, while Papuan leaders stand ready to argue for their land. These negotiations are not dramatic standoffs, but a slow, careful dance each side, cautious each step, weighted with decades of history. You watch Michael Samar emerge as the central figure in these talks, his calm demeanor masking a firm resolve. Alongside him, other leaders from diverse regions join forces, weaving their voices into a single call for autonomy. It is remarkable, a land of hundreds of tribes, each with its own languages and traditions, finding a shared cause. In 1972, a breakthrough arrives. Papua New Guinea is granted self-government, a milestone that transforms the air itself. You feel the shift as local ministers take charge of their departments, shaping policies without needing approval from distant Australian hands. For the first time, decisions about roads, schools and health services are made by the people who live with their consequences. The country is not fully independent yet, but it is steering its own course. Despite progress, challenges loom. Australia still controls defence and foreign affairs, and some Australians mutter that the country's diversity will make it impossible to govern itself. Historians still argue whether these doubts were rooted in genuine concern or veiled paternalism. On the ground, however, Papuans prove capable of managing their affairs, even as they face the massive task of uniting a fragmented land into one nation. Villages buzz with debate. You pass elders sitting under palm trees discussing whether independence will truly improve life or simply bring new problems. Younger voices, shaped by education and exposure to the outside world, argue passionately that freedom is worth the risk. The air is full of anticipation, tinged with anxiety about what lies ahead. Australia prepares for the inevitable, gradually transferring administrative powers. Relations remain largely cordial, with Canberra keen to ensure a smooth transition while protecting its economic interests in the region. You witness small, symbolic moments: the lowering of Australian flags in local offices, the rise of Papua New Guinea's own symbols of identity, and speeches that blend gratitude with a firm assertion of independence. Amid this political transformation, the cultural heartbeat remains strong. You watch as traditional dancers perform during political rallies, their drums echoing like thunder as leaders speak of a future where old customs and modern governance coexist. One quirky yet telling moment unfolds during an early independence planning meeting. A chief attends wearing a feathered headdress alongside a neatly tailored suit, blending two worlds into one image of leadership. It's both humorous and profound, a living statement that the new nation will not have to choose between tradition and modernity. It can carry both. By 1973, the Pangu Party secures a majority in the elections, solidifying its leadership in guiding the country toward full independence. The road ahead remains full of obstacles, economic uncertainty, administrative challenges, and the monumental task of building national unity, but the direction is clear. The people have tasted autonomy, and there is no turning back. You feel the pulse of a nation preparing to be born. Negotiations have done their work, laws are being rewritten, and the flag of Papua New Guinea is ready to rise. The final steps toward independence are within reach, and every heartbeat, every drumbeat, seems to count down to the day when this land will finally stand free under its own sky. The morning of September 16, 1975 dawns clear and golden, as if the sky itself has decided to bless this day. You stand among a swelling crowd in Port Moresby, the air filled with a mix of excitement, pride, and a hint of nervousness. People from every corner of the islands have travelled here, Highlanders in bright plumes and shell necklaces, coastal villagers in colourful sarongs, officials in crisp suits, each carrying the weight of their own stories, yet united for this moment. Children sit on their parents' shoulders, waving small flags that flutter like beating hearts. You can feel the anticipation tremble in the ground beneath your feet. The ceremonial ground is alive with music. Traditional drums pound in rhythm with brass bands playing under the blazing sun. You catch the scent of roasted pork mingling with the salty breeze from the sea, the aroma wrapping around the crowd like a warm embrace. The old Australian flag still flutters above the government building, but its time is nearly done. Australian officials stand alongside Papuan leaders, their expressions a mix of solemnity and respect. The handover is peaceful, almost gentle, yet profound enough to change the course of history. Michael Somare, now Chief Minister, and soon to be the country's first Prime Minister, steps forward in a blend of traditional attire and Western dress, a symbol of the new nation's dual identity. His voice rises over the hum of the crowd, steady and calm as he declares the birth of Papua New Guinea as an independent state. You listen closely as he thanks Australia for its role in guiding the transition, yet he makes it clear that this land will now chart its own course. His words ripple across the gathering, settling like seeds in the hearts of those who hear them. Then comes the moment that will be remembered for generations. The Australian flag is lowered slowly, its fabric catching the sunlight one last time before folding neatly in the hands of an official. Silence falls over the crowd, an almost sacred pause. And then the new flag of Papua New Guinea rises, its black and red fields split diagonally, adorned with the Southern Cross and a golden bird of paradise in flight. The crowd erupts into cheers, some singing, others crying, the drums and horns joining in celebration. The bird of paradise, a creature of beauty and freedom, soars on the cloth as if to say, "This land is ours and we will fly where we choose." You glance around and see faces lit with pride. Elders who have seen decades of colonial rule stand shoulder to shoulder with youth who will inherit the future. Even the Australian representatives seem moved, acknowledging that this independence is not a loss, but the birth of a new partnership. The transition has been peaceful, a rarity in a century marked by violent struggles for freedom. Historians still debate whether this smooth handover was due to Australia's willingness to let go or to the steadfast unity of the Papuan people, but either way it happened, and it is remarkable. After the ceremony, celebrations sweep through the city and spill into villages across the country. You walk through streets filled with laughter, singing, and the clatter of bamboo instruments. Food is shared, dances erupt, and even strangers embraced like family. The night sky glows with fireworks that mirror the stars, a cosmic reminder that this moment belongs to something greater than politics. It belongs to the spirit of the land and its people. Yet amid the joy, there is awareness of the road ahead. Independence is not a magic solution, it is a door opening to new challenges. Leaders will have to govern a country of immense diversity, rugged geography, and complex needs. There will be struggles over resources, debates over unity, and the constant balancing act between tradition and modernity. Still tonight, those worries can wait. As the fireworks fade and the crowd begins to rest, you feel the weight of the day settle into history. Papua New Guinea is free. The journey has been long filled with shadows and light, but now the people stand beneath a flag that is entirely their own. The night sky, vast and unbroken, seems to whisper a promise. The future, with all its trials and triumphs, is theirs to shape. The celebrations of independence eventually quiet down, but the echoes of that day linger like the rhythm of a drum that never fully stops. You walk through the newly independent Papua New Guinea in the months and years that follow, sensing both the pride of a young nation and the weight of its new responsibilities. The air is no longer charged with the tension of colonial rule, but with the excitement and sometimes the anxiety of building something from the ground up. Michael Samar, now the first Prime Minister, leads with a calm yet determined vision, guiding the country through its first steps. You see him traveling across provinces, listening to villagers, and urging unity among a people as diverse as the land itself. The challenge is immense. Over 800 languages, countless tribes, and rugged geography make governance unlike anywhere else in the world. Roads cut through only parts of the country. In many areas, small planes or boats remain the only way to connect communities. You can almost hear the land itself sigh, as though testing whether this new political order can truly hold together. Economically, the nation faces hurdles. Agriculture remains the backbone of life, with coffee and cocoa plantations offering some export income, while subsistence farming still feeds most families. Resource extraction, gold, copper, oil, emerges as a tempting path to wealth, yet also a source of tension. Multinational companies arrive, and with them come debates about who should benefit from the land's riches. Historians still argue whether early resource deals were fair or exploitative. But what's clear is that the young government must learn fast how to balance foreign interests with the needs of its people. Culturally, Papua New Guinea thrives. The independence era sparks a renaissance of identity. Songs, dances, and art flourish with new purpose. You attend festivals where the bird of paradise flag flies high, while traditional warriors perform alongside modern bands blending ancient rhythms with electric guitars. It's a celebration of diversity, a reminder that this nation's strength lies not in uniformity, but in the vibrant mosaic of its cultures. You smile at the quirky ways tradition adapts to modernity, a young politician giving speeches in English while wearing a cassowary feather headdress, or village gatherings where elders debate national policies on transistor radios powered by hand-cranked generators. The political road is not without bumps. You witness moments of instability, leaders clashing, votes of no confidence, regional tensions bubbling. In Bougainville, a struggle over autonomy begins to simmer, foreshadowing conflicts that will later test the country's unity. Yet despite these challenges, the spirit of independence remains strong. Papua New Guinea proves resilient, navigating crises with the same adaptability that has allowed its people to thrive for millennia in a land of mountains, jungles, and seas. Internationally, the country steps onto the global stage with cautious confidence. It joins the Commonwealth, builds ties with neighbours, and asserts itself as a sovereign state. Australian aid continues, a reminder of the old relationship, but now it comes not as a command but as support to a partner. You sense pride in every handshake at international meetings, every speech declaring that this land speaks for itself. The years roll on, and the struggles of nation-building continue. Corruption, economic inequality, and infrastructure challenges weigh heavily. Yet through it all, the people remain deeply connected to their roots. They plant gardens, tell stories under the stars, and pass down traditions that have outlived empires. This continuity gives the nation its anchor, ensuring it does not drift too far from the wisdom of its ancestors. As you stand once more on a ridge overlooking the highlands, the wind rustling through the grass, you reflect on the journey, from scattered tribes untouched by the world, to a land carved by colonial powers, to a country that raised its own flag. Papua New Guinea has endured and transformed. The bird of paradise on the flag seems to spread its wings wider every year, soaring above challenges and toward dreams still unfolding. The night falls gently, wrapping the land in a soft blanket of stars. The fires in village hearths glow like constellations on the earth below, and you realize that the story of Papua New Guinea's independence is not just about the past. It's about the ongoing rhythm of resilience, adaptation, and hope. The drums may quiet, but they never stop. They beat on in every heart, guiding a nation forward one step at a time. And so, with the wind whispering through the trees and the mountains standing watch, you let the story fade into a calm stillness. This land, this people carry their identity forward, not as fragments of a colonial past, but as a nation that has claimed its own voice beneath the wide, endless sky. You take a slow breath, letting the story settle like mist over a calm river. The voices you've heard, warriors, villagers, missionaries, leaders, drift into the quiet night, their echoes mingling with the rustle of palm leaves and the distant call of a bird of paradise. The fires that once blazed with celebration now burn low, casting a warm glow that soothes rather than excites. You feel the weight of centuries lifting, replaced by a sense of peace. Papua New Guinea's journey is not one of sudden triumph, but of steady resilience, like the roots of trees gripping deep into the soil through storms and sun. The challenges never vanish, yet neither does the strength to face them. You picture the flag swaying gently in the night breeze, its bird of paradise silhouetted against the stars, a reminder that freedom is both fragile and enduring. As the last traces of light fade, you let yourself drift with the rhythm of the land. The mountains stand tall, the rivers keep flowing, and the heartbeat of a nation continues soft and steady. Somewhere in a village where the fire has turned to embers, an elder begins to hum a song that has been sung for generations. You close your eyes and listen, letting the melody carry you into calmness, into stillness, into rest.